Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Start the Week with Spencer. This is Doman International's weekly online webinar where parents of children with special needs join from all around the world and ask us their. Sorry, I got some auditory feedback there. So this is the webinar where parents join from around the world and they ask us their biggest, toughest questions. And so today I have Douglas Doman who's joined me. Douglas is the founder of Doman International, and we'll be asking Douglas to talk a bit about his experience working with families of children with special needs for over 40 years. And
over 50 years, thank you.
Over 50 years. Okay, there you go. And we'll also be specifically focusing in this interview on the books that Douglas has written and co-authored. I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong that you've written and co-authored 5 different books.
Sounds right.
Yeah. So I'll be asking Douglas about those books today. And Douglas is also my dad. So I might call him Dad today during the interview. Thanks so much for joining us.
Let's do it.
Great. Okay. So do you mind, maybe before we jump right into the books, talking about how did you get into this work? How did you get into the work of working with parents of children with special needs and with the children themselves?
Well, when my father, Glenn Doman, the founder of the Doman Method, began his work with special needs and brain injured children, he did that in 1955. I was 2, and he sold the house that we lived in order to buy the property of the nonprofit organization that he had created. And at that time, we had brain injured adults, 30 of them, that were living at the institutes. And my mother, Katie Doman, was the head nurse. So our apartment was about 30 feet from the nurse's station. So as a 2-year-old, if I wanted to be with my mother, I could escape our apartment and the person looking after me and go and find my mother not far away. But that meant that we were living right in the middle of 30 brain injured adults for as long as I can remember. And then eventually, so many children came that they kind of pushed the adults out. And our work became 99% kids and adolescents and young adults.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, maybe turning now toward your books, I wanted to start by asking you about 2 books that you and I actually wrote together. One is called The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, and the other is called Answering Autism. And I was wondering, sometimes parents will ask us what, if they have a child with special needs, what is the first book that they should start with? So what would you say to a parent if they asked you that question?
Well, we specifically wrote the Doman Method book for that purpose, to get parents started, to explain why and how it's possible to grow and develop the brain. And so we lay out the whole neuroscience behind our program at the beginning of the book. And we put in history about grandfather, since he started it all. And then, of course, we go into some, very specific programs, initial programs that the parents can do, because the objective of the book is for parents to start actually doing something to develop their children cognitively, physically, and physiologically. And I think we even have a nutrition chapter in there as well.
Yeah. And then what about the book Answering Autism? Who would you recommend that for?
Well, we could debate that, but yeah, I think it would make sense if a child has been diagnosed as autistic, to start with that book first. But then we would propose that you also go to the Doman Method book, because it provides additional information.
Mhm. You spend a lot of time in your books writing about the importance of the floor and why it's so critical to place a child down on the floor for their brain development. And I was wondering, can you talk a little bit about why is the floor important for babies and young children who don't walk yet? And also, and then a second question to that is for children who might be older with special needs, why is the floor still important? But let's start first, if it's okay with babies and young children who don't walk yet. Why is the floor important?
Well, it's become increasingly more important. And if you had asked me, at the beginning of my career, when I was 50 years ago, that 50 years from now, do you realize that you're going to be spending lots of time and effort because babies are not being put on the floor? I mean, if you had asked me that, I would have said, that's crazy. It'll never happen. But that is, in fact, what has happened. Babies are not, I'm talking about well babies without any neurological issues, are not given the opportunity to be on the floor to move. And it's absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, nowadays, we're more aware of hygiene and cleanliness than ever before. Um, we learned in Japan, uh, almost 50 years ago, that you when you come into the house, you take your shoes off. Fine, everybody takes their shoes off. That helps keeps the floors clean. So babies just need clean, warm, safe floors. That's all they need. And if you just have that, that's enough for them to learn to crawl on their tummies. Now, when grandfather did his research, back in the early 1950s and 60s, and he took his research, from Arnold Gazelle and Louise Bates, who were the pioneers of child development. They recognized and understood that babies would crawl on their tummies and would creep on their hands and knees, two different stages of mobility. Well, it was common in the 50s and 60s that babies would crawl on their tummy. Now they don't do that. I mean, very few. It's a rare baby that ever crawls on their tummy. More babies do creep on their hands and knees, thank God. But I mean, even physical therapists, not, although my father and your grandfather was a physical therapist, and in the treatment of children with brain injuries and special needs treatment, we don't often agree with what's going on in terms of physical therapy. But even here now, the American Physical Therapy Society has said that babies are not getting enough tummy time. Well, tummy time is just baby talk for giving babies opportunity to crawl on the floor on their hands, on their bellies, and creep in on their hands and knees. So, our this book, Fit Baby, Smart Baby, Your Baby. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it now. Yeah,
Okay.
that's perfect.
This book goes into all the details about how to set up the ideal floor environment for your child to crawl, creep, walk, run, and jump.
Yeah, and I just want to make a quick comment. If anyone hears us say grandfather during this session, we mean Glenn Doman, who's my grandfather and Douglas's dad. Uh, Douglas, or dad rather. If a child doesn't get enough ample opportunity to crawl, and they're held their whole infancy, they don't get the chance to crawl, creep before they walk, or only tiny bits. What problems could that create?
Well, first of all, there are many other aspects of child development that ride on the coattails of mobility. For example, respiration. Um, as we move, the faster we move, the deeper and faster our respiration is. The more we move nonstop, the better the endurance of our respiration is. And for well babies and for special needs children, this leads to the development of their language. To be able to talk, you have to be able to breathe properly and maturely. So, there's a vitally important factor, particularly for both groups of kids, but particularly for the special needs kids, where language is often a serious problem.
Yeah. And could you talk a little bit about how being on the back can affect the shape of the baby's head and skull?
Well, yeah, this is, an issue that we go into heavily in the Fit Baby, Smart Baby, Your Baby book. And we also go into it more heavily. Can I also show this book too?
Yes, please. Yeah, please do that.
Yeah. So this is our physical book specifically for special needs children, from immobility to walking, where we lay out the whole physical program here for a parent of a special needs child. And in some cases, you could take a totally immobile kid with this book if you follow it and do what it says, and do it enthusiastically and intensively. And you can get your child both walking and running.
Yeah, I'd like to make a quick additional point where when a child is crawling on their belly and creeping on their hands and knees, they're developing a low area of the brain called the midbrain. And the midbrain is also very important for visual movement and coordination, which is an ability called convergence, the ability for us to use our two eyes together. And so when children aren't given a lot of opportunity to crawl and creep, very often their visual convergence can become poor or be underdeveloped. And that could create problems with eye contact, but also problems with activities like reading, writing, hand-eye coordination. So there's a lot of early mobility development can also greatly affect cognitive development. And so could you talk a little bit about...
And by the way, in both books, we go into that. For the Fit Baby, Smart Baby, Your Baby book, for well babies, we go over the connection between mobility. That's the title. It's in the title, Fit Baby, Smart Baby. And then the same thing in terms of our for special needs and children with brain injuries. We go over it in our physical book, from immobility to walking. And I didn't really answer the second part of your question, was that children who are called special needs, in actuality, their problems and their symptoms come from the fact that they are brain injured. And of course, this is something that Glenn Doman and his mentor, the great neurosurgeon and neurologist Temple Fay, understood and started to use right after the Second World War, going into the 1950s, that the problem was brain injury, And if you wanted to solve those children's problems, you had to grow and develop the brain. That is, the root of what the Doman method is all about. So if one is injured, particularly in those lower areas of the brain, such as the midbrain that you mentioned, they will often skip certain developmental processes like crawling and creeping. And so brain injured children will skip that. Sometimes they'll stay immobile as a symptom of their brain injury, or they will learn to walk late, often quite late, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But having skipped crawling and creeping, they then lose some of the benefits. And Glenn Doman understood that in the 1950s, and it became a vital part of the Doman method that special needs children be given the opportunity to crawl and creep.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm going to take this opportunity just to, first of all, I'm going to bring Colleen Hudson in. Hi, Colleen.
Hello.
Colleen is our Director of Representatives and the first person to speak to new parents on the phone when they want to learn more about Doman International and what we do with children with special needs. And Colleen is always here to answer all of your questions. Douglas, I wanted to ask you another question. You mentioned that many children with special needs will skip the crawling and creeping stage. Some children also get stuck in certain stages. So they'll do other activities like they'll roll. Some children for years and years. Other children will sit. They'll get into the sitting position and sometimes get into what's called the W position, and they might be there for years. Can you talk a little bit about, some children scoot also. And you probably don't know this, Dad, because you don't spend as much time on social media as I do. But sometimes I'll see videos on social media of children scooting, and parents or adults will post those videos kind of in a humorous way. Like, look, the child is scooting. Isn't that funny? And of course, as a child brain developmentalist, my first thought is that is not a normal way for a child to be transporting themselves around. My first thought is concern, not finding it amusing. So can you talk a little bit about those kind of problematic stages? Because I think one of the reasons they're really concerning is some parents think that it's a positive thing. They'll think, of course, rolling, sitting is a good milestone to reach, but it's not something that's good to get stuck in. So can you talk a little bit about that? Why they're problematic?
Yeah. But first, what's social media?
So
Sorry, I'm not that bad.
You're lucky if you don't know, believe me.
Oh, talking of which, Spencer, could you check and see if we're live on Instagram? Because it looks like we've had some issue.
We are live on Instagram.
Okay, now we're good.
Yeah,
Right,
we were a little delayed. We had a problem at the start, but yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm appalled, to hear that, because rolling as a means of transportation and sitting and scooting as a means of transportation are horribly abnormal, and a real wake-up call that a child has a neurological problem. So if a child is given opportunity to crawl and creep, of course, there are details. We can go into those in terms of the ideal environment to do that, how to make it as easy as possible that the child can succeed. But beyond that, it's a wake-up call. Yes. Yes, it is important that babies can roll over and they can sit up, but not as a means of transportation. And this was the part of the genius of the developmental profile that Glenn Doman created, because in his observations of child development back in the 50s and the 60s, children do hundreds of things, new things as they develop. But the question is, what are the essential things necessary for the brain to grow and develop properly. And rolling and sitting up and scooting are not part of that process, but having the opportunity to crawl and creep is. And of course, we've had that validated by the fact that society has limited babies' opportunities to crawl and creep, to the point where even the American Physical Therapy Society says that babies need more tummy time. That means time to creep, because they figured it out as we figured out 70 years ago that it's essential for child development.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. So we have some questions that have come in from parents. And the first one, Douglas, is from Mari Bell, who's asking, how much tummy time does my 6-month-old baby need? I have limited space at home. Do you have any recommendations on the ideal area size for my baby to practice crawling?
Okay, well, our program, particularly for well babies, has been very well accepted and used in Japan for more than 60 years. And the Japanese have very little apartments. One of the reasons they sleep on futon is because you can roll them up and put them in the closet, which then gives you a lot more space in your house, for kids to be able to move around. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the whole house should be crawling friendly, creeping friendly for babies. So it means the floor surfaces should be clean, they should be warm, they should be safe, and babies ideally should be clothed properly. Now, for a baby learning to crawl, like a 6-month-old, you want them to have bare hands and arms, because they use their arms and elbows to pull themselves forward. You want them to have bare knees and feet, because they push their knees and feet into the floor and push their body forward. So bare hands, elbows, knees, and feet. And for a baby learning to crawl, you want a smooth surface to decrease friction and make it easy for them. And what kind of surface is that? It would be a vinyl, a linoleum floor, or in our Fit Baby book, we talk about making an infant crawling track, and you can even buy them from our partners Moby Them in Spain. Yes, it is in Spain, but they make all of our physical equipment for well babies and for special needs children, and they make it absolutely perfectly, exactly the way we designed it to be. And they've even improved the design in some cases. So we talk about an infant crawling track. That's a great place, because you can actually take those and cart them around. So if you're going to grandmother's house, you can throw it in the back of the hatchback car and take it to grandmother's house, so babies can crawl on that, wherever they may be. So it's a matter of giving them maximum opportunity to move with the right surface, and clothed properly.
Great, thank you. And then, well, we have more of a comment here from Sandra for you. And she said she loves your book in Spanish, the How to Teach Your Baby to Be Physically Superb. And she said it's helped her a lot. Thank you, Sandra. Could you talk a little bit? Sometimes I'll get a question on a session. What's the difference between the Physically Superb book and the Fit Baby book? Can you talk about that?
Yes. When the book was first published in 1986, the title was How to Teach Your Baby to Be Physically Superb. And that book was translated into Italian, Spanish, Russian, Japanese. And then when we did the second edition in 2006, our publisher, twisted our arm to go to the new title of Fit Baby, Smart Baby, Your Baby. So it's the second edition of the same book. We did learn a lot from 1986 to 2006, and we made changes, of course, in the second edition. And in that way, the book is, to be preferred.
Great, thank you. So, parents, whether you're joining us here on StreamYard, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, go ahead and start typing your questions for Douglas Doman in the chat box. Of course, we can answer any question about any area of development. We've been focusing a lot on mobility development today because that is Douglas's area of specialization, and he's written books on the topic, but he's also written in his books, The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, topics on almost every area of child development are covered, right? From mobility to cognitive development to nutrition. So go ahead and type your questions in, and we will answer them. Douglas, my next question for you is a bit about families who come to Doman International. We have in-person appointments here in Philadelphia, in our European Center in Italy. Could you talk about the experience of coming to Doman International, coming to our clinic, what that's like for parents, and why it can be life-changing for kids?
Well, as you know, we have 9 regions. We are Doman International. We're a totally international organization. Our parents come from more than 40 countries and 6 continents, and we pride ourselves in the diversity of our families, geographically, and also in culturally and religious and every reason. We love it when we get a family from a new country and a new ethnicity. So, the process really to have the best experience and get the most, from your appointment, the process really begins much sooner than stepping into our offices in Conshohocken or in our campus in Italy. And that is, that's why we wrote these books. We wrote the books so that parents can get well prepared and actually start doing some program. I mean, it's about what makes the children better is doing the program. And we wrote those books, and they have very specific programs in them. And we specifically wrote the books with the very specific programs so that parents would start to use it. And we also did it for parents who will never, ever, be able to have an appointment and come to us. I mean, our program should be ubiquitous. It should be for any special needs brain injured child anywhere on the planet. And it's part of our responsibility to make that possible for our parents, and also to make it financially possible for them as well. So all the preparation in terms of our books, our websites, of course, our courses and our lectures, to the extent that parents can do these, it's going to really make that first visit much more successful because they're well prepared and they know what they're getting into. And of course, even before the parents come to us, the whole process is started with a qualified Doman Method practitioner calling them, doing the developmental history with them, which basically is a history. By the way, if you look at this from a medical standpoint, histories in terms of medical diagnoses have almost been completely forgotten. I mean, it's ridiculous. Well, our histories which come from our parents come from even before conception, right through conception, birth of the child, right up until the day that we see the child. So that process is very important for us to understand what's happened to the child developmentally and what problems they have and what we need to solve. So the other thing that's important is to get the most out of our program, and that means get the best result with your child. And of course, that's all that matters. The results for the child is what we live for, what we continue to do our research for in order to get even better results with the children. And that happens by creating a really excellent support team. If we go back to the 50s and 60s, when I was a kid growing up on my father's campus, virtually all of the mothers were stay-at-home mothers. Well, stay-at-home mothers are ideal for our program. We need a parent there all the time to do the program and get the best results. And we train the parents basically to be us. We train them to be the therapists. We don't do any therapy. We teach the therapists who are the parents. So all of this is part of the preparation. And, for our course, for example, where, we really hope that both parents will attend the course fully, but we invite our parents to pack the room, get grandmother in there, get aunt in there, get, older brother in there, get the whole family understanding why we do the things that we do. And when it goes to aunts and grandmothers, they can read the books as well. So the better preparation, the more of a support system you have, then the better the program that's going to be. And, we're very, very sensitive about our mothers. Our 95% of all of our children are getting the program by their mothers. And so that means the health, the happiness, the strength of the mother is key to the success of our program and the child's progress. So mother comes first, number one. And if we take care of mother, and dads take care of mother and supports and helps mother as well, it's part of creating that best infrastructure that's necessary to really get the best results.
Yeah, thank you. Colleen, I was wondering, you obviously speak to a lot of parents. Any questions that you get specifically, it could be about books or mobility development, that you think it would be helpful to get Douglas's thoughts on?
Well, I do have parents ask me, how soon we can get the books to them in various countries. I do have parents, of course, it's available on Amazon, so most parents can get it pretty quickly. But I've had parents ask if we ever ship from our office or the Italian offices, just for the ease. So that's one. That's kind of a very housekeeping question, but when they want to get that book in their hands, it's a good one.
Yeah, I would say, Colleen, if obviously I'd recommend do Amazon first,
Yeah.
just because Amazon has, to most countries, I'd say now, pretty good shipping ability, and they can get there pretty quick. But yes, if a family, Colleen, were to say to you, we want the book and we can't get it on Amazon, yeah, absolutely, we could organize shipping it out to them for sure.
All right. Yeah, it's funny, but it's a very practical question. I know it's available for download on Kindle.
It is,
well.
And there are also at least the Doman Method book and the Answering Autism book are available as audiobooks as well.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and of course, our bookstore in Italy, in Tuscany, we have all the books in all the languages, and we've been mailing them out for 35 years. So that's just something we do.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I've had parents ask how effective can they be just using the books. And I understand that these are families who haven't yet been empowered, with the information. So I guess the question, Douglas, with all of your years of experience, have you talked to parents who got in touch and said, look, we were never able to come for an appointment, but the books really changed the way that we saw our child. We saw real improvements in their life as a result of what we implemented with the books.
Oh yeah. Every once in a while we get a letter from a mom or a dad that we've never met, that says never seen us. We've never seen them, and they just simply use the books. And I mean, we've put a lot of time and effort into books and getting them translated in order that they can. And the fact of the matter, I mentioned this with the immobility to walking book. You can get great results with the book itself, and the Answering Autism book also is highly specific in terms of programs. So yeah, that's why we wrote them.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's the parents I speak with, by and large, they come to us because they already know, or they're starting to realize that the answer lies with them. Finding the right answers. They keep going to different sources, and maybe they're told, oh yeah, we'll do this or we'll do that, and then it doesn't really add up to anything. And so finally they say, okay, I need to find something where they're going to take advantage of the information I have about my child, the knowledge, and then they're going to take us, give us the information we need to move forward. And yeah, I think trusting the parental instinct is so key. I feel like I remember Glenn saying that, some of these things, he said they used to be considered common sense. It was the sort of thing that parents knew. And he said, and now you tell parents what what we're trying to tell them, and they say, oh yeah, of course. It resonates because it's true. It answers that instinct that's already there and says, I'm not I don't have to sit around and wait for experts to tell me everything. Which is funny.
Yeah, and there are some parents, over the years, where even before our books were written, they just kind of intuited our program themselves and got great results. And they did it, basically the root of the success of our program is the frequency, intensity, and duration of the stimulation that the children receive, and the opportunity that they are given in order to, show what they've actually learned, and put out the information from their brain in a motor way. So, there are parents throughout time that have made their children well at home because they just knew it in their guts.
Well, if it's okay with the two of you, I'd like to try something. I've never tried this before, so maybe it's a foolish idea, but I'm going to pull up a video, Dad, that I'd like you to watch, and then tell us what you think about it. This is a video of a boy named Beckham, who, Dad, you actually saw him last week at our clinic. But this is a video of him from 6 months ago, and he's crawling down an inclined crawling track. Okay, so I'm going to play this video, and then I'll get your thoughts on it.
Let's go. Come on, crawl. Keep crawling. Woo! Yay! Hi! Come see me!
Now, this is him crawling on the flat floor after the inclined crawling track.
Come here, bud. me. You're coming to see me. Oh, look at you go.
All right. So yeah, I'm wondering, what are some of your thoughts watching that video? What would you point out to parents that you think is important that we from what we saw there?
Well, it's a very loaded question because that's a plus video, and so from A plus parents. So I mean, everything about that is perfect. I have nothing to say other than, yeah, that's it. That is the way it's done. So there you saw Beckham on his infant crawling track. So that track can be flat for babies to crawl in it, or it can be inclined, which is what happens in the beginning when a baby is learning to crawl like Beckham. So they've inclined it. And what happens, and this is explained in both books, it's taking, and this is something that my father created, and it's a stroke of genius. I mean, what's a crawling track cost? A couple $100, particularly if dad makes it on his own. And now with physical therapy, it's all about robotics and tens of thousands of dollars of equipment that nobody can afford. And here Beckham is the beauty of this is that gravity is helping him to go forward. So if the track was flat, gravity is pushing him down into the center of the earth, making it more difficult to move. So in the track, with much less effort, gravity will help him to crawl forward and feel how it does to do that. Now, you can see that he's pulling with his left arm, and it looks like maybe he's pushing a bit with his left leg, which is what we would call a homolateral pattern. So he's using his left arm and leg together in order to pull and push himself forward. And he'll do that. And then within the next many months, as he gets to be a better and better crawler, he will start to go into a cross pattern because that's the way the brain develops. That goes from a no pattern to a homolateral pattern to a cross pattern. And of course, they're helping to make that process happen more rapidly because they're also patterning Beckham, which is providing his brain with the sensory information of how it feels to be able to crawl forward on his tummy. And then you can see that he's doing it, on the flat surface as well, which is the whole purpose of the incline in the first place. So it's really a beautiful video. He's obviously enjoying it. And, the advantage of trisomy 21, and, who talks about the advantages of trisomy 21? It's all disadvantages and bad and so on and so forth. Well, there are advantages in trisomy 21, and that is that the world can't screw up their diagnosis because you can tell them at birth. And that is one of the greatest transformations of our results with trisomy 21 children is that they come to us at the earliest age. Their parents know within hours of birth they have a trisomy child, and they manage to find us quickly. And as in the case with Beckham's parents, and here he is starting to crawl. Now, do you know how old he is in that video?
I think he's 7 months old in that video.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's actually above average in his mobility because average babies don't get that kind of opportunity. So here he is moving, and other well babies, neurotypical babies are getting bigger and heavier and fatter, making mobility even more difficult for them. And that is not the case with Beckham. So it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and now 6 months later, because he just came into our clinic last week, he's now creeping on his hands and knees everywhere. So he's reached the next stage of mobility, and he's also pulling himself up to cruise. Yeah. So, and by the way, one of the things that parents,
sorry to cut you, but also in a cross pattern,
Yeah.
which is essential to prepare him for the next stage of walking.
yeah, and parents also commented to me, again, this shows a lot about the mobility cognitive development connection, that he's really become much more engaged over these. He's much more connected now than he was 6 months ago. He's hearing sounds better. He's making a lot more eye contact. He's reacting to what people are telling him more often because of this mobility development. All right, we've got a question here from Maud, and I really respect Maud's honesty here. She's saying, "Thank you, Douglas. This is where I falter with the program. Frequency, intensity, and duration. My consistency stinks." So what do you recommend, Douglas, for someone who is trying hard to do the Doman program but is struggling with consistency?
Well, my guess is that Maud needs more help, that she needs, that infrastructure, that support system behind her. So, I would, if I'm right, I would urge her to get as many family members involved, friends involved. And if you don't have any of those, then, even young people that, or volunteers, if you go back 50 and 60 years ago, our program was famous because volunteers would come to the house and do patterning with the child. And that still exists today, but not in the way that it was, back in the 1960s and even the 1970s. Volunteerism is not what it is, which is sad because it's a wonderful thing for our children. And those volunteers also became a kind of, in the absence of social media, the volunteers would, run into somebody in a grocery store, recognizing that the child was a special needs child, and say, hey, I'm a volunteer for special needs child and he's doing great. And, I think it could help your kid. And now we have a new mother who, would never have learned about our work. So, volunteers are great, but you can also go to senior centers and get retired people who are often looking for things to do. And in this case, with seniors and retired people, you're doing them a favor because they fall in love with the child. They realize how important the support they're giving is, and that can really give them the kind of purpose in their lives that they wouldn't have otherwise. So these are many different ways that you can get the support and the help that you need.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Maud, just make sure that you're not maybe biting off more than you can chew. Sometimes a parent wants to do everything perfectly, and because that's the vision that they have, they finish off each day when they haven't achieved everything on their list. They view it as a failure, and that becomes demotivating, right? So sometimes it's about looking at what your goals are and then making those goals something that you can achieve on a daily basis and complete. Because one of the most important parts of the Doman method is that motivation comes from success, right? The more successful you are, the more successful your child is, the more motivated you'll be to keep going. So Just make sure you're doing a program that can be done consistently, and then when you're doing it consistently, you can build on it. But make sure you've got an achievable goal.
Well, what's the name of the book that also, it's a business book, but it applies to our program? And isn't it that perfect is the enemy of good?
Yeah, that's
So
right. Yeah,
it would be better to have a good program done more consistently than a perfect program that is not done so consistently.
exactly. Okay. So I'm going to take one more question from the audience, and then Colleen and Douglas, I'm letting you know what I'm going to ask the two of you. So Colleen, I'll ask you if you have any announcements to make. I didn't get to announce upcoming appointments or anything like that at the start. And then Douglas, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all guests, which is, can you tell us about one child with special needs who you've met, who changed your life or who changed your outlook on life? So I'll give you, I probably should have told you about that in advance, but I like getting the spontaneous answer. But while we wait for that, Douglas, so we have a question here from Sandra who says, what do you recommend for flat feet? My son's feet have improved a lot, but it's still flat. And now doctors are recommending orthopedics and massages. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that is that there are lots of people, I don't know the statistics on this, but I suppose millions of people around the world who have flat feet, and they're surviving, they're good, they're doing what they're supposed to do. So, why
I have flat feet. Yeah.
why make a religion of this? So, and then with children who are special needs, it is often a symptom of their brain injury that they have flat feet. So it's nothing wrong with their feet. The problem is in their brain, which is not telling their feet how to move and develop properly. So the answer here is, the basics of our physical program. Crawling, the child is pushing with his toes and the side of his feet, that helps to develop the foot and create the arch. When the children begin to walk, that can help. We're running is a very important part of our program. That can help as well. And we don't get into devices in shoes and whatnot. And in fact, we encourage walking barefoot in the house as much as possible, and during good weather, barefoot outside as well. And so not becoming dependent on orthopedic devices and there. So I think you've got more important things to be concerned about.
All right, Colleen, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Any announcements that our parents should be aware of?
So yes, we are scheduling appointments for. We're now into May. Like June, July. Every now and then some cancellations happen in between. So if you're looking at your calendar and saying, "Ooh, this would be a great date," please, and it's April, please get in touch with me because we can certainly talk about it. We may have you on a wait for cancellation list, but yeah, if you're thinking about coming for an appointment with us, definitely get in touch sooner rather than later. We can always plan out ahead. And you get coaching leading up to your appointment. So there's an advantage there to planning in advance as well, because you've got a lot more time to spend, getting ready. So when you come for your appointment, it'll be so seamless and you'll get a lot out of it. So those are my announcements.
Great. Yeah, and just to let everyone know about some of our international trips coming up. So we've got a trip next week to see families in the Balkans. So we're sending staff to Serbia and Croatia to see families. In April, we're seeing families at our European Center in Pisa, Italy. So families in the Europe and the Middle East will be coming to see our staff there. In May, we're seeing families in India. in New Delhi and Bangalore. And in June, we're seeing families in California. And I do want to say, of course, we're seeing families year-round at our clinic here in Philadelphia, our headquarters. All right, Dad, I'm going to let you finish off. So can you tell us about one child with special needs who you've met, who changed your life or changed your outlook on life?
Well, I mean, as I said, I've been doing this now for 50 years and, grew up on the campus of the Institute since the time I was 2. So I can't remember a time when I wasn't surrounded by brain injured children or adults. But you fall in love with so many families, over the years. And this memory is more about love than anything else. Love of the family for the child, love of the family between themselves, and love of us, for the family. So this is an Italian family from Bologna. Their name is Zincati, and Valentina came to us, I think, as a 5-year-old, and diagnosed, with cerebral palsy, and a particular kind of cerebral palsy called athetoid cerebral palsy. And in terms of mobility, these can be among our most challenging children. They're injured in the midbrain. If the injury is profound, as was the case with Valentina, they come to us immobile. But the beauty is that often they are having very little or no injury in the cortex, which means they are not injured in the cognitive areas of the brain. And this means that they can develop to very high, way above average levels cognitively, which is the case with Valentina. But her parents were just spectacular. Both mother and father were MDs. Now, for MDs to cut through all the garbage and baloney out there, about our work is a wonderful thing. And they were so great because they were parents first and they were MDs second. So they kept their their instincts as parents as number one, and of course had an incredible love for their daughter. But also they came to us with an incredible support system because both of mother's sisters lived with them. So both aunts came from the get-go, took our course, came to all the visits. So the aunts were totally qualified to do the program, just like the mother and the father. So they basically had 4 totally qualified adults to do the program, along with, volunteers as well. And Valentina herself, these children, as I said, cognitively have incredible potential, but a huge challenge from a physical standpoint, which is difficult. I mean, as grandfather said, these children, they have the life of and the ability of scholars, but they have to lead a life of an athlete, which is a pretty, difficult, cross to bear when you want to have your head in a book, but instead you're working, from a physical standpoint. Well, Valentina, just because she was surrounded by love, was totally cooperative, doing her very best, all the time. And, they worked very hard, got great results in terms of getting her above average, which, she wasn't when she started. far from it, actually. And then her language came on as well. Now, because the problem is in the motor areas of the brain, the quality of the language can be difficult. But I mean, she became fully at and above age level in terms of her language. In terms of mobility, that was the challenge. We got her crawling hundreds of meters. We got her creeping kilometers a day. And she worked very hard underneath our overhead ladder. I was her coach, and I failed to get her walking, even though they did everything that we asked them to do. And so it's on me, not the parents, and God knows, not on Valentina herself. So eventually Valentina moved on off of our program and went to university because she was so bright, got into the theater. Her passion, the last time I heard from her was, she was working in the theater, I think both in acting and also perhaps in writing and other aspects of, what happens to make a theater production go on. But I mean, in terms of a perfect program and a perfect family and a perfect kid, you just can't do better.
Well, thank you for telling that story. And, as I remember Valentina. Valentina also wrote at least a short book about her experience. It was in Italian because she's Italian, so I don't think it was ever translated into English. But I really, what you've said really resonates with me because, we work with such amazing families. You can't help but fall in love with the families and with the children. And when the children sometimes hit a plateau or an obstacle in their development, it really, from a tough standpoint, it's hard. It's hard on the parents. It's hard on the staff when we see that. But from a positive standpoint, it also drives us to innovate. I've had many experiences where, because I work more in cognitive development, where I'll have a child who is the 1 in 100 children on our program who isn't learning to read. And it forces us to say, well, everything we know hasn't worked. What's something new we can try? And that's when you can sometimes discover something magical, right? So the desperation can lead to something amazing. So thanks so much for sharing that story.
And of course, I've never forgotten, I never will forget Valentina and her family. But every time that I see a child with a similar injury to hers, we are just, all the more motivated. And of course, this is many years ago. The program has moved on. So I think that we probably could get her walking today. And that's, something that we can be proud of.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If you joined us late, we started off by talking about Douglas's books. So we have the Doman Method, From Special Needs to Wellness. This is the first book we recommend for parents of children with special needs. And then for parents specifically with a child with an autism diagnosis, the book Answering Autism is a great place to start. Thank you so much for joining us, Douglas. Thank you, Colleen.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.